Hi everyone and welcome to a new episode of the Allplane Podcast where we talk with the movers and shakers redefining the future of commercial aviation. Before we dive into today's episode, I would like to remind you that all previous episodes, along with many other interesting stories about innovation and sustainability in aviation, are available on the Allplane website at Allplane.tv, Allplane.tv. I would also like to invite you to subscribe to our newsletter, which focuses on sustainability in the aviation industry. You can find the subscription link right on our website. And now let's get into today's episode. Our guest today is Mukund Karanjikar, the founder and CEO of a very interesting sustainable aviation fuel startup called CleanJoule. And what makes CleanJoule so interesting, you may ask? After all, there are quite a few startups out there working in the field of SAF. Well, two things caught my attention. The first one is CleanJoule's technology, which by the way uses biogenic feedstock, mostly agricultural waste. And it promises to deliver more energy per unit of mass than other, let's say, more conventional processes. The other is that CleanJoule is also bringing SAF to space. Yes, you heard that right. One of the products CleanJoule is working on is designed to power space rockets. And you know what? This is not just driven by environmental reasons, but also because CleanJoule aims to supply the space industry with a more performing fuel than the one it currently uses. In fact, CleanJoule's exploits have not gone unnoticed. And investors such as Indigo Partners, which is the group behind airlines such as Wizz Air, Volaris, and Frontier, are backing the company with their dollars. So today in this episode of the podcast, we're going to talk about all of this with Mukund. And we are also going to learn a few more details about this promising new SAF technology that he and his team have been working on for more than a decade. And we will talk also about how Mukund envisages CleanJoule's industrial and commercial rollout towards the end of this decade. Finally, I also get to ask him about the broader SAF market and how CleanJoule fits into this sort of, let's say, global scramble that is taking place right now in order to add this much needed SAF capacity. As always, I think it is best if, without further ado, I just stop talking and I welcome our guest today, Mukund Karanjikar. Hello, Mukund. How are you?
I'm doing very well. You?
Very well. Thank you so much for being here on the podcast. I was visiting an airline, Wizz Air, one of the leading European airlines, a few months ago, and they told me you should totally speak with Mukund as soon as possible because these guys at CleanJoule, they are doing amazing work in the field of sustainable aviation fuel. So there we go. We are here today on the podcast to talk about CleanJoule. But before that, I would like to just start with a quick introduction. Like every other guest, we always ask to just make a quick introduction, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background, and how you got involved into sustainable aviation fuel.
Absolutely. Happy to. Again, thank you so much for having us here. Happy to go through the whole CleanJoule story and all our investors, including people at Wizz Air, Ivan and the whole team, they are always very kind to us. So we appreciate that they asked you to talk to us. My name is Mukund Karanjikar. I'm the CEO and founder of CleanJoule. At CleanJoule, we focus on manufacturing of 100% and fully drop-in sustainable aviation fuel. My background, I'm a chemical engineer by training. So if I was not doing this, I don't know what else I would do. So that's the straight answer of why we got into this. But the bigger issue at hand is someone has to think about decarbonizing hard to decarbonize sectors such as aviation over a long period of time. This game is not for the faint-hearted. This is not a 3-month thing. This is not a 12-month thing. This is a lifetime pursuit. So I have been personally involved post-PhD for 20 years in changing the art of innovation in sustainable flying. And CleanJoule as a journey has been around since 2009. So happy to brief you on some of that. But I personally just find it super exciting to tackle problems of high magnitude. That's why I got involved in it.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, the challenge is gigantic. You've been working on this for quite a long time. Actually, 2009 is very early on when it comes to sustainable aviation fuels, and you have developed a technology that I think has some very unique characteristics that I would like to delve in more detail. You also have developed a fuel for space applications, which is also very interesting, I think. And I would like to talk about that, even if we usually don't talk about that much about space in this podcast. But I'm finding increasingly that the line between aviation, air travel, and space is becoming increasingly blurred as well, as we are seeing more and more companies exploring this area between the two, hypersonics, space, suborbital, space travel, all of that. So let's start maybe by CleanJoule, the foundation. So you started it in 2009, and what's been more or less the evolution? I mean, we don't need to go into like lots of detail about every every single step you've taken, but you started in 2009. Is it privately funded? What was let's say, the different stages you have to go through until, yeah, getting investment from some prominent airlines and other players in the investment world?
Absolutely. We started working on making alternative, sustainable, renewable aviation fuel from before word SAF was coined. Back in the days, we used to call it biojet, which essentially just means jet A made from biomass, right?
Okay,
So
so
we
so you were focused on aviation from the very beginning. It's not like
correct.
other players that started with biodiesel and other types of sustainable fuels and with the...
Absolutely.
Okay, that's very interesting. And where did you started it?
In Salt Lake City, Utah, in the United States.
Okay, and that's where you still based there?
That's where we are still based.
Okay,
Yeah.
great place. I was there a few years ago, done some skiing, and
Oh,
yeah,
wonderful.
really enjoy my time there. So 2009, you created this company. That's quite a long time. I mean, did you get funded by some VC company or some investors to be able to work all these years on a project that I guess it's still today? I mean, many of these projects have quite an uncertain outcome.
Oh no, I fully agree. I think the genesis of CleanJoule has always been in the realization that you don't want to raise private money too soon. That's the fastest way to die. What you want to do is game-changing innovations like next generation aviation. So think about the internet, think about the satellites, think about rocketry, and none of those ever saw light of the day without participation by governments. And I don't mean just United States government, I mean governments in general around the world.
Yeah.
So whenever you talk about early stage innovations that have substantial impact into future years, participation from the government is very crucial. And since I'm in the United States, it was fairly straightforward, not easy, but straightforward for me to work with US government. So we started with a series of contracting from the US Navy and the Air Force in looking at alternative aviation fuels. As I said, where sustainable was not around back then. So SAF is keyword for the 2010 and later people. So we started working on developing a manufacturing method for alternative to jet A fuel with 3 different premises. Okay, so if you really look at history of aviation, only 125 years of aviation history. And the real innovation was the very first one, which is the Wright brothers took heavier than
Of
air
course, yeah.
craft
Mhm.
with 1 gallon of gasoline to the air. And the second real innovation was when we transitioned away from flying on gasoline or petrol and piston engines to kerosene slash jet A and jet engines, right?
Yep, the
And
jet
that
turbine, yep.
elevated the art in aviation. Now, the question in front of us back in 2009 was, well, why create the same hydrocarbons when we are changing the feedstock, when we are changing the method of manufacturing? Why not look at creating superior hydrocarbons than those that occur in kerosene or Jet A.
Okay.
That is the distinction of CleanJoule. We produce hydrocarbons that have superior energy content per megajoule per gallon in it, that have superior ultra cold flow properties and ability to then envision a path to 100% SAF.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to go into more detail shortly about the fuels you're producing. I don't know if it's right to say producing. You're still kind of an experimental stage, right?
We are producing. We have
You're
an
producing.
industrial manufacturing plant here.
Okay. Um, but getting back to the defense aspect of it, so the rationale for investing in this project was not so much environment, but actually more like a strategic rationale of having a more performing fuel and maybe also diversify fuel sources. Is that right?
That's correct. Is the logistical resiliency of fuel
Mm-hmm.
availability is what drives the military, not
Yeah.
just American military, but militaries around the world.
Okay, okay. Yeah, that's what I thought when you were explaining that. I mean, of course, it makes sense also. We often talk about the environmental side of stuff, but there's another aspect as well, which is that you are diversifying the fuel sources that you have. And countries that don't have oil naturally can also tap into that resource, even if it's right now more expensive, but there might be some strategic reasons for to invest in this. Um, so then all these years you've been working on these technologies. I think you have right now two solutions. One is called CycloSAF and the other is called CycloRP. Can you guide us through what these technologies are and what they do, what are their characteristics, and why you have two separate products?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So but to your earlier point, the boundary between aviation/civil aviation and space aviation or aerospace is largely disappearing because of convergence of various innovations, whether it is engines, whether it is how you take off, among other things, materials of constructions, etc. In our case, our pursuit definitely began with let's create superior hydrocarbons that contain 10% higher megajoules in the same gallon or liter. Let's create superior hydrocarbons that have superior ultra cold flow properties so that they don't freeze up further you go. So you go longer, right? First, 10% higher energy content, you fly farther. We have superior freeze point properties, so we can fly higher. And then since the process is fairly cost-effective manufacturing, you can fly cheaper too. So those are the connotations of civil aviation world. Then the space or the outer space aviation is all about if you look at a rocket from any angle, what you are looking at is 90% of it is fuel. 90%. Fuel plus oxidant, but the whole thing is called fuel in general sense.
Yeah.
And then you have this little cherry on top, which is called the payload. You launch like 3 kilograms worth of satellites with 93 kilograms worth of fuel. And we should not be doing things like this in the 21st century. We should be launching a lot more payload with much less fuel. And that's what drove us as an enterprise to innovate and create higher energy containing, not only sustainable, which is a key part of our pursuit, but higher energy containing rocket propulsion fuel. That's what our Cyclo RP product is. So to put into perspective, you could get tens of percent higher energy released depending on design of the rockets from our fuel so that you can do two, three different things, by the way. Either increase your payload, right? So carry
Mm-hmm.
more people per plane,
Yeah.
equivalent. Increase your payload. You could also go farther on the same payload. So there is no reason to stop at lower Earth orbit if you can launch to a further higher orbit. And
Okay.
then the third thing is, and most people don't know this outside the field of rocketry, is re-entry for second phase. It's
Okay.
something we have not figured out. With higher fuel payload, because the fuel carries more energy, not weight, but more megajoules taken to space. When you talk about re-entry of second stage, you can actually now enable it with our type of fuel. So a number of benefits to Cyclo RP.
CycloRP, just to clarify, CycloRP is the product for space solutions, yes, space applications. And
Correct.
CycloSAF is the product for the, let's say, conventional uh, aviation on Earth, well, on the sky, but inside the atmosphere.
Yes.
Um, so tell us about the actually the production process. What's the feedstock, and what makes your product more performing? I'm not expecting to disclose any any industrial secrets here, but guide us a little bit through the process and the sort of technology you have come up with that makes this possible.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. We start with biomass as a general feedstock. Then biomass comes in various forms. You talk about agriculture residue, you talk about forestry residue. There are countries around the world who have invested a lot of money, including the UK, on what's called energy crops. And energy crops are essentially biomass crops that are grown on non-prime ag land, rain-fed. So what some other countries call it marginal lands. And so sum total of all of those is essentially terrestrial biomass. We take terrestrial biomass and through a combination of clever molecular transformation techniques, convert those. And this took 15 years to develop, by the way. So I don't want your audience to think like these people got lucky or these people just got up one fine day and, you know,
Yeah,
they had the imagination in their brain and draw it out on the whiteboard and it
yeah.
just worked as expected. No, it was a lot of toiling away in our labs and pilot plants over last 15 years to then create hydrocarbons that have structural distinction but similar properties to those of Jet A. So what happens is you can still boil in the same range. You can still have what they call same flash point or flash point in the same range. But because we have structural distinctions in the molecules we create, they are fully drop-in but higher energy containing. You
Hmm.
wouldn't know the difference if I showed you a transparent bottle of Jet A and a transparent bottle of our stuff. You would not know which one is which. It's like testing two different beers at the bar. If they don't tell you, you're like, I want that one. That's
Hmm.
how it is. You want that one because it has 10% higher megajoules. And the manufacturing process, because we took 15 years to evolve the process before we actually raised the money, we got it working flawlessly as we made that transition from pilot plant to industrial demonstration plant.
Uh-huh. And you are referring often to the better performance, but how you quantify this increased performance? Are there some numbers that you can share here comparing with Jet A? And then maybe we can compare to also talk about the performance for space. I have to say I'm not that familiar with the sort of fuels that are used in space rockets, but but I'm sure there's people in the audience that are. So let's dig into the numbers. What do you do better in terms of SAF for aircraft, for airliners, and what do you better when it comes to space rocket fuel?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there are two limits on current SAF. So if you take a barrel of petroleum, right, it's a boil baby boil game. You boil off, the LPG goes away, you take gasoline or the petrol cut. At the bottom, there is diesel cut, heavy oil, and the cut in between is called kerosene. The kerosene cut that has then ASTM specifications to be able to sell to fly your aircraft, my aircraft, has what's called a density specification, which means how much does it weigh per unit volume, right? So gram per cc or kilogram per liter. And the specification for that says you can sell a kerosene product to airliners if it has a minimum density of 0.775. We make hydrocarbons that have a minimum density of 0.82.
In what units are we talking about?
This is in kilogram per liter
Okay.
or gram per cubic centimeter, but kilogram per liter. So it weighs 0.775 kilogram per liter of volume. And when you go by the plane side and the pilot is buying fuel from the fuel supplier, it's sold in volume, right? It's sold in liters or it's sold in gallons. And then there is a dial on the instrument panel that says how many pounds or kilograms of fuel now the plane currently has. None of those two things actually matter beyond money changing hands. What matters is what's the total number of megajoules that the pilot just purchased. You could be cheated out of megajoules by getting a fuel that weighs 0.775 kilogram per liter versus something that weighs 0.82 kilograms per liter. Nothing else changes. We put 10% higher megajoules in your tank now. So
Okay.
now the pilot can make two choices. Choice number one, buy less. Choice number two, go further, buy the same, right? And so that's numerically the advantage of the fuel that we sell versus the fuel that is currently being bought by airliners around the world.
And what about the price? Because one of the problems with SAF now is it's more expensive, but I remember you said earlier that we can do it cheaper. Is it like for like? How you quantify this?
So we do not even take into account the 10% higher megajoules because, pipelines and tanks and aeroplanes and world and you don't have a pathway of your own to get into the wing of the aircraft. It's all going to be disappearing into the fueling network, right? So the 10% megajoules is just a feature. I cannot have monetary value associated with it. So whenever we compute our ability to compete, that's always with Jet A on a cost of manufacturing basis at commercial scale. I'm at a smaller scale, I'm at an industrial scale today, but at commercial scale, where our first commercial manufacturing plant comes online in 2029, that's when we are cost competitive with Jet A on a parity basis.
On a parity, you mean it's going to cost more or less the same? No,
Correct.
okay. And when you mention this, let's say energy density content, I mean that could be a bit variable between different types of fuel. Just out of curiosity, is this something that the purchaser can somehow calibrate or assess when purchasing the fuel, or there's a bit of margin here where there might be variations that are not accounted for? I don't know how ingrained are these differences into the purchasing price or negotiation or the terms of the contract between the fuel suppliers and the fuel purchasers.
Yeah, at the moment, they do not have an ability to dictate number of megajoules they want in their tank, which I think that's where they should go. That will require some sort of competition. I mean, there is a publicly announced a project that Boeing has with the Federal Aviation Administration in the United States on how can we figure out the number of megajoules that the pilot has on board, which is
Okay.
the, as I said, which is a single key metric that genuinely matters. Volume does not, weight does not. And so if that evolves into the next generation sort of instrument panel where it shows you megajoules, that would be fabulous. Short of that, we are fully drop-in. Where it matters to have higher energy density hydrocarbons is this. So if you want to go, all the airliners and they have this association called IATA, and the private aviation people have their association called
Yeah.
FAA, and I'm sure your audience are familiar with that.
Yes.
And they have a target of going net zero by 2050, right? If you want to do that, at least 65% contribution has to come from use of SAF. However, every single pathway that currently manufactures SAF and sells it commercially is limited to 50% blendability
Yes.
because they produce SAFs with a density of 0.75 kilogram per liter. Remember, I said you cannot sell it until it hits 0.775 kilograms per liter. How do you do that? You just can't bridge the gap, and it's not a small gap. It's a huge, huge gap. How you do it is you blend the 0.75 hydrocarbons with 0.82 hydrocarbons of CleanJoule, and you have created 100% SAF barrel now that does not need blending with petroleum. That's a true value that CleanJoule will add by making superior hydrocarbons. It's to enable 100% sustainable flying, none of this 50% blendability nonsense.
Okay, you kind of answered my next question because I wanted to ask you about the blends. So you answered that already. Then for space fuel, which type of fuels are you competing with in this particular space, put intended? Because I have to say I'm not familiar with space propulsion technologies as much as with more conventional air travel ones. What's the landscape there, and what's the benefit you are bringing in terms of comparing it to the current fuel that they are using?
Absolutely. So they use a fuel called either RP1 or RP2. It doesn't matter what it indeed is. It's called rocket propulsion 1, rocket propulsion 2, which is essentially an ultra refined version of kerosene or Jet A. Okay, so you can, for all intents and purposes, it could be Jet A and the rockets will still fly. They just make it ultra refined for a variety of different reasons. It has to fly hotter, among other things. RP1 and RP2 are limited by how many megajoules they have per liter as well. Our cyclo RP, which is a superior cycloparaffinic mixture of hydrocarbons, that now can give them at a minimum 4% higher megajoules in the volume, everything else remaining same, which then commensurately reduces the oxidant load as well. Remember, I said 90% mass is fuel and oxidant. You put more 4% more megajoules into the tank, and now you can commensurately get rid of the oxidant as well. So you have 10% plus benefit on either range or payload or both, or change the orbit that you can now get to. Only successful way of going to moon so far has been using kerosene or RP1, RP2 as the fuels to fly to outer space. Nothing else has gone to space. People talk about hydrogen, people talk about methane. These are all experimental rockets, as I call them. The only commercial rocket, even today, take a company like SpaceX, just using it for reference, no relationship. Take a company like SpaceX that currently launches satellites in air. All of those satellites are launched using RP1, RP2. We offer a superior replacement of both of those fuels.
And in this case, would you still need to blend it, or could you use it 100% as a 100% fuel?
This
You
would
mean?
be this would be 100% neat with
Okay,
the blending for a cyclo RP.
and would be more or less the same cost.
Yeah, actually cheaper than RP1, RP2.
Oh, okay, interesting. And I guess, I mean, actually, one interesting aspect here is obviously there's the environmental side as well. I don't know how that transfers from commercial aviation to space. We don't talk that much about the environmental implications of the space launches, but we are seeing more and more space launches. I don't know if there's any assessment or evaluation of what does it represent in terms of emissions. I guess in your case, if that became a problem, you could say, hey, our fuel is also more environmentally friendly because it's sustainable fuel.
Yeah, I think the lot of it has gotten lost into the noise of space launches. And I don't, no pun intended, there's a lot of noise in the media around rockets falling off and rockets not succeeding. And so they have their own problems to deal with. But what's more important is we should be talking about it. It is an entire industry that depends on fossil fuels. And we want more and more space launches. Space is becoming a lot more contested. We want this blanket of satellites for everything from our handheld phones, like, oh my God, I can't live without internet for 3 minutes, from all of that to observing global weather patterns. And who knows what capabilities satellites would then impart to us as humanity. And our species is not known to stop exploring just because there are negative impacts of the exploration, right? We always explore. That it's innate to us as a human species. We give an optionality that you don't have to now sacrifice well-being of the planet to explore the outer space. You can do that sustainably. And that dialogue needs to be far, far elevated. Everybody talks about space debris. Well, that doesn't touch me at the moment. What we should be talking about is emissions of spacecrafts today at ground level, terrestrially. That is important to me because that clean air and the associated climate change impacts of that industry as it grows by leaps and bounds is going to be far, far more.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, we're seeing such an explosion of the such a boom in the space industry at the moment, and I guess it's just gonna get it's just gonna get bigger with reduction in costs and what the SpaceX and other operators are doing. Lots of private entrepreneurs as well trying things. So that's an interesting aspect that I think, yeah, it might be worth maybe a separate episode to discuss. But getting back to CleanJoule, um, we have talked a lot about the development stage, but where are you now in terms of development? You said you're at the industrial stage, but not yet producing commercially, right? What's your current setup and your basically your road to market?
Yeah, absolutely. No, happy to brief you on that. So we are at what we call industrial demonstration. So in my industry, people who make liquids, petroleum, petrochemical, whatnot, there are three key stages to evolution. One is the technology development. The second one is piloting. Third one is industrial demonstration. Piloting is coming out of lab. Industrial demonstration is going into the manufacturing plant, and then a full-scale commercial manufacturing. The journey between industrial demonstration and full-scale commercial manufacturing is that of money. It needs very little innovation. The innovation is all the way up to where we are
Yeah.
now. Innovation is 90% of these gray hairs. Hopefully, the 10% remain dark on my head. That's all about industrial demonstration to commercial scale, only about raising money. So we're raising funding now for the next round to go to, in my world, again, what we call final investment decision to set up a full-scale commercial manufacturing plant.
How much have you raised so far?
So we have there are some numbers that are confidential because of government relationships, but
Mm-hmm.
the publicly known raise is $50 million that we had raised for our Series A funding, and the names of the investors are out there. But just to
Yeah.
reiterate, Indigo Partners, they are a big aviation fund out of
Yeah.
Arizona in the US. Gen Zero, they're a clean tech investment arm of Temasek of Singapore. CleanJoule Partners, it's a boutique decarbonization-focused PE fund out of New York, and then three of our lovely airlines, Wizz Air, Volaris, and Frontier. All of them are. Here is the beauty of our airlines versus the media chatter that you hear. They put their money where their mouth is. They are investors in my cap table
Yeah.
because they want to enable the world of sustainable aviation, not only read about it on the front page of Wall Street Journal, unlike CEOs of many other airlines around the world who are playing the game of let me be an observer, and if the field becomes huge, we'll invest. So, but with our government relationships, we have multiples of that money that we have spent over last 15 years to arrive at where we are currently.
Let's say you get to commercial stage. That's planned for 2029. Is that right?
Yes.
You plan to set up a production plant where in Utah or somewhere else in the States?
This manufacturing plant would be set up somewhere in the Midwestern United States. So you talk about Illinois, Iowa,
Okay.
Nebraska, that whole corn belt.
To be close to the feedstock source, I guess.
Correct.
Okay. And how big can this be? Because, I mean, considering all the advantages that you have been outlining, that has, I guess, huge potential. I guess you have kind of calculated how much of the market you can get with this technology. I guess it will require quite a lot of capital to scale, though.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, as you know, and I'm sure your audience know this, it's about 100 billion gallon Jet A market globally today. And we don't even make 0.1% of it in terms of sustainable aviation fuel.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
the journey is very long. To your point, a lot of capital would be needed. I'm a conservative chemical engineer, so my first plant is going to be only 20 million gallon or 80 million liters per year. And that's largely because then that manufacturing plant becomes the blueprint for global expansion. We have partners from Asia Pacific who have asked us if we would set up manufacturing there. As you know, Wizz Air is in Europe, so we have a lot
Yeah.
of push from Western Europe to manufacture there. Latin America, Mexico, for example, Volaris is a partner. So not just United States, all these places to then multiply these manufacturing plants at the speed of light, really. It's just about appetite of various countries and investors in those countries to change how their economy currently is when it comes to aviation. Do they want to rely on global energy flows of fossil dark liquid called petroleum? And it's dark in many different ways, right? It just doesn't look dark. Some of it is dark business too. Do you want to rely on that, or you want to be self-sufficient, right? Aviation in that way touches the poorest of the poor and the richest of the rich and everyone in between. It's a great equalizer if you really look at it. And you as a country then have to worry about how do you become self-sufficient. And one way to do that is produce your Jet A equivalent material called SAF in your own country using your own feedstock. Your own people work in those plants. You have different economic development that you can think of at a national level. So there is no limit as to how much can this grow. 100 billion gallons is a huge market.
Isn't the feedstock a bit of a bottleneck? I mean, the Midwest, I guess you've got plenty of agricultural waste and produce that you can use as feedstock, but I guess at some point that has a limit of how much you can use, and I don't know where this limit is really.
No, and you are exactly right, Mikhail. No one knows where the limit is, and I'll tell you why. If you draw a black box around Earth, the only way things grow on this planet is from sunlight, which in my memory hasn't changed, falling on Earth every day, correct? So you get that 50 watts per square meter every day, no matter what. So now it's about our ingenuity as a species to say, you know what? No, I'm going to grow another billion metric ton of terrestrial biomass. And while I do that, I'm also going to scrub the atmosphere of the excess carbon dioxide that my species has put in over last few hundred years since the Industrial Revolution, right? We went from literally 0 to 433 parts per million, and all these numbers are out there, and you can read the IPCC report. That's the way to innovate. But to ask the final nirvana question of if I cannot make 100 billion gallons from it, and a lot of people do this tactic. This is an old oil and gas industry tactic to say, oh, we can't replace it all. What's the point in doing it at all? Yeah, guess what? You cannot have a six-pack abs by going to the gym for one day. It needs years for you to get that. It's exactly the same thing. Use the excess biomass the planet currently has, and I'll give you quantitative examples. It's not a philosophical narrative. United States currently produces 17 billion gallons of ethanol from corn alone. You convert all of that industry because cars are going electric. They need to wake up. No need for ethanol other than drinking. So your need for ethanol has gone away for terrestrial transport. You are going to move all of that to SAF. That's 10 billion gallons, 10% market. One country, one feedstock, one established industry. Now you take that to Brazil, Thailand, my home country, India. You take that to places where substantial amount of biomass feedstock currently grows. You can crack the market 30 to 50% already. And then you start about next generation feedstock. You go to Philippines. We are partners in the Philippines, in Thailand. You're looking at rice paddy feedstocks, and there is no stopping to how many metric tons of excess biomass are available that can be terrestrially harvested with paying clever and clear attention to not destroying the planetary sustainability associated with growing biomass. We're not talking about deforestation. We're just talking about excess biomass that would be available. And people use this final nirvana thinking, oh, if we can't make 100 billion gallons, we should be making nothing. That's not the way to do it. Let's make the first 10 billion gallons. And then the path to next 10 billion gallons will open up right in front of our eyes.
Yeah, actually, I was about to ask you how you see your technology sitting in the broader landscape of SAF production and all the different pathways. As you know, in the European Union, there's been this initiative to put mandates that have a very large percentage allocated to synthetic SAF production, precisely because of concerns about the availability of feedstocks. So how you see the SAF landscape, let's say 20 years from now, maybe that 20 years maybe too much, but 10 to 15 years from now, if there are such performing technologies as you are developing, does it have the potential to become the dominant pathway, or you expect more to be a mix of different technologies?
Well, it's a very large market, and we hope it is not one winner that is CleanJoule. We hope it's many different players with many different pathways that are though economically attractive. You cannot pay up just because it is a fancy technology.
Is it patented?
Sorry, go ahead.
Is it patented? You have
Yes, we have a series of patents and entire
okay.
intellectual that goes with engineering know-how, trade secrets, all of it. So we are not worried about that part. I hope other entrepreneurs succeed as well with their pathways. But the key part is it should be economically attractive to replace Jet A. End of the day, I'm in the business of manufacturing a commodity. If it does not compete with another commodity that is being sold for last 75 years to fly my planes, I have lost the battle before it began.
Well, yeah. Where do you see the company CleanJoule in the next 3, 5, 10 years? What are the next milestones that you are aiming for? Apart from, obviously, there's a very clear one, 2029 commercial production. But besides that, what are the next milestones before that big moment? And then after 2029, what are the, let's say, what's the roadmap after that?
Absolutely. No, I think, look, once the 2029 plant is fully operational, concurrently, we have 3 additional facilities that are in planning phases as we speak. One in Western Europe, one in Asia Pacific, and one more in the United States. And the reasons are very simple. We have investors push. So Wizz Airline, for example, is in Europe, and every time I meet Ivan or the whole management of Wizz Air, they ask me, where are my tankers?
Yeah, she was on the podcast actually just before the summer. Yeah.
Yeah. She's a flag bearer of the whole field of sustainability. So
indeed.
aviation.
I'm going to add a link to this previous episode, and also to another post I made about Wizz Air sustainability plan, because I went to Budapest in April precisely to learn about the Wizz Air roadmap in sustainability. So, but sorry, that's a parenthesis. You have 3 more plans already on in the drawing board. They are not yet being built. They are just in project now, right?
That's correct. Yeah, they are project planning phase. We have an inbound from Mexico, as well as, Volaris is an investor.
Yes.
And so there is a base in Mexico that genuinely cares about sustainability. And we have an inbound from there in order to evaluate manufacturing of SAF in Mexico as well. So the idea next is geographical expansion of manufacturing base of CleanJoule.
So would be Western Europe, in Mexico, and the third one?
Asia Pacific. So we have a very large company in Asia Pacific. If I even say the name of the country, you will know which company. So I'll keep it confidential. Somewhere in Asia Pacific, a very large energy company that has approached us to already evaluate manufacturing possibility in their country.
Okay. That's clear then. And so the idea is basically to expand, to replicate, scale up this, and then who knows? What the sky is the limit, right?
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. In our case, even sky is not the limit because we go to outer space.
Yeah, indeed. Is it the same production process for the 2? So each of these plants is able to produce the two types of fuel that you have developed?
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Well, if people wish to learn more about CleanJoule, what sources, what resources would you suggest? Are there specific websites, social media channels, other types of content that you would recommend for people to check this out?
We are on cleanjoule.com. We have a LinkedIn page for those who want to go to our LinkedIn page. I am personally on LinkedIn. If a human being writes a note to me on LinkedIn, I always respond. I do not respond to AI written notes, but I'm happy to answer any questions your audience may have as a follow-up to this particular podcast.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Mukund, for this very interesting and fascinating conversation and overview about what you guys are doing at CleanJoule. I think it's very promising, and really wishing that you guys succeed and we get clean and performing and and cheap fuel to fly around and also to go to space, which is the next frontier. So thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mikhail.
If you like this podcast, you can support us by giving it a great rating on Apple, Spotify, or whichever platform you get it from. And remember, you can, of course, subscribe to it. And you can also get regular updates through the Allplane website. That's Allplane.tv. We have a newsletter where we cover the aviation industry every week with a special focus on innovation and sustainability. So give it a go. Thank you and goodbye.